Today we're going to be doing the Skellige Bronzes tier list, and let's just start off by going over the tiers again. We have the Excellence tier. These are cards that are played often across the faction or deck definings for a good deck in the faction. We have good cards, which are just good. They're played. You can use them. You have okay cards. These are playable. You can consider running them, but usually there's better choices for you to do. And other cards, like maybe up in these tiers, you'd want to run instead. Or like since these are talking about bronzes, maybe these are cards you'd consider like a one of as an option. We have niche cards. These are rarely seen, but they have their moments. So these might be like the best cards in a lower tier deck, or cards that very specific metas or very specific situations are pretty good. And we'll talk about some of those. Skellige's a unique situation for those. We have weak cards. These are generally not played, but they could be with a buff. Or like these are cards you wouldn't want to play. Sometimes people play them for like a niche situation, but they're even more specific than the niche, or their niche payoff isn't good enough to really just be considered. You have bad cards. These are just things you don't want to play. They're not good. And meme cards, which are unplayable other than for fun. And that being said, sometimes having fun is the most important part of the game anyway. So these can be pretty interesting. Now, let's just begin with getting into the first card here. As we do that, we have a Boardage. So let's start off with a Boardage here. It's a 5 provision raid. Just being a raid automatically makes it good because of Highland Warlord for most cards. So I guess we'll skip ahead to him in a minute. Probably should start with a couple. Now we'll start here. So a Boardage is 5 version raid, like I said, does 2 damage, and Bloodthirst 2 plays a pirate from your hand that draws a card. So it cycles your deck. It's essentially, it's not thinning, but you're cycling another card through your deck. So you're getting through your deck fast, you're seeing more cards, and that is a very strong effect. So pirates love this. Raid warriors, for example, love this because it is, like I said, it is a raid at the end of the day, and it is still playing pirates from your hand, which their guys are pirates. So overall, this is a very strong card. I'm actually going to stick it right up in excellent. Most things that let you see more cards in your deck are very good. Right? Like most things that let you see more cards are very good. It also does damage as Bloodthirst synergies. If you're playing Raid Warriors, you can kill stuff with it. So yeah, probably just want to mention that here. We'll just say Highland Warlord. We'll just skip ahead to him because it'll contextualize a lot of cards we're going to talk about. So Highland Warlord, we'll just do this next, so I don't have to keep mentioning it. We'll just get into them. So it's a 3 power, 5 version unit, the Human Warrior. Veteran, so it gets +1 base power each round. And deploy, increase the damage of your raid cards by 1 for the rest of the game. Each time you play this, you're essentially adding like 8 to 10 damage to your deck. So you just play this, and then all your raids do more. Play it again, second copy, playing from your graveyard, and all your raids doing 4 extra damage, which is just enough to kill everything, pretty much. And that's the idea of Highland Warlord. Highland Warlord is the deck-defining card. Raid Warriors is the most common deck I see in all of Skellige, and it's been that way for several patches, except the one where they nerfed Highland Warlord and War Plans at the same time, I think it was. But yeah, overall, this is like the most common card I see in the entire faction, and it's incredibly strong. Just like giving more damage to all your raids is amazing. Next up, we have, actually, we're going to skip ahead here for a second, because there's another card I want to do. We'll start off with, what's it called? The one with the wolf. Feral Bond. The reason we're getting to this is because there's a lot of cards that'll be contextualized by these two, so it's easy to just get them out of the way to start with. So Feral Bond's a raid as well, so it spawns Skellige Wolves on the enemy row, and damage it by 1, then create a Bronze Skellige Warrior not in your starting deck, and Bloodthirst 3 you can spawn and play any Bronze Skellige Warrior not in your starting deck instead. So this is a way to see all the bronze warriors in the game that you wouldn't normally put in your deck, which makes a lot of them have like niche playable situations, or sometimes you see this guy like, oh man, in this one situation where there's Skellige Wolf, it's a really good card. So a lot of cards we're going to talk about, we're just going to mostly ignore the Feral Bond here. We're talking about if you want to include them in your deck, kind of like we did on the backup plan for Scoia'tael. But I just want to mention this early. Now, this is also a raid, so it's really good. It sets up Bloodthirst. You're playing a non-Highland Warlord deck, so like pirates want Bloodthirst. Also a very, very strong card here. We're just going to grab that Feral Bond as well. I don't think it's quite on the same level as the other cards we just did, but it's a very strong one. Where are you, Feral Bond? There you are. That one good, I think. I think a Boardage is better because it cycles your deck. Like I think this is a good card. It has more uses, but I just think cycling your deck is so much more impactful. This is also good with Highland Warlords because the Highland Warlords will increase the 1 extra damage, means the Skellige Wolves, which are 2, take 2 damage and die and come back to your side of the board. So this is also a really good card. All right, now that we've done all those, we can just kind of talk about the cards more easily here. So if we start off here with, what do we have? So that's the Marauder, I believe. Yep, on Craite Marauder. So 4 for 4. Human Warrior, deploy, melee, split 3 damage among all enemy units. This is kind of fine. It's not bad. Usually there's other options, like the 3 random damage isn't always the best. It works a little bit with a couple of the golds like Alula, but for the most part, targeted damage is kind of better, but it is, on the face of it, 7 for 4 total value. And this is an alright card you can consider playing. It's not bad. Against things like Neckers that are weak, you can like ping them off, but most of the time your damage is just like kind of getting, not killing stuff with this damage most of the time, but it's not too bad. Next up, we'll go in with some more on Craites here. We've got the on Craite Raiders. This is a 5 for 5 with an order for 2 damage. Bloodthirst 3 gain Zeal, which is actually not that hard to trigger sometimes. Human Pirate Warrior, so it comes with a whole bunch of tags, right? Pirates and Warriors are the main Skellige tags. Then you have Veteran, so by the end of the game, this thing's 7 base power, doing 2 damage. For 5, that is quite good. If you King Bran, it's going up to 8. Overall, a very strong unit for the faction, and one that's just played in most decks at this point. Like, this is a really good card. It's just really good. Next up, we have the On Craite Longship. It's a 4 for 5 with an armor. Melee, whenever your opponent plays a unit on their side of the board, damage it by 1. This is really key to pirates, because this is, you put this out there, everything they play takes a damage, you're getting armor, a lot of synergies there. And if you're playing decks, even decks that aren't pirates, say like Otkel, Otkel's kind of a pirate deck. The one where you play extra Freya's Blessings. Like, this is the ship you play, because it's the best of the ships. Overall, a very good card. It does die to 5 removal, but in Pirates and specifically, it gets more armor. In those decks, it definitely is super good. I would say it's even one of the key cards there. I'll stick this up here too. Next up with the On Craite Armorsmith. Deploy, boost an ally unit by 1 for every 2 armor and the highest armor card in your hand. Pretty simple. It is just a human, so no other tags. And this is what you play in the armor meme deck, where you play like Cyana, and then you play Hamlet Protector with Operator. You have 2 of them. Get infinite armor, and then you just play these guys and win the game. Very good in that deck. The deck's more of a meme deck, though, like not a top competitive deck. Because of that, it is the key card there. It's going to get a niche tag here from us. Next up, we have the On Craite Blacksmith, 4 for 4. This guy used to be pretty common, actually. Order, boost an ally by 1, charge 1. So he starts off with 1 charge, no Zeal, so he dies to 4 damage removal. Whenever you play a warrior, he gains a charge. This is a pretty slow engine overall. I'm going to say it's pretty weak. I don't think it's terrible. The value, like you can kind of see, right, each time you play a warrior, you get 1 charge. Over the course of a round, you play several warriors. This warriors generally synergize. Boosting units is better if the unit is an engine, because you're protecting it. This card is an engine. Warriors like to do damage. They're not engines, so this isn't quite as good. So I think it's a little bit weak, and also just, yeah, it just doesn't synergize well with the warrior playstyle for the most part. Next up, we have the Greatsword. Greatsword's got a couple of things interesting going on with him. So he's a veteran, 10 for 6. Deploy, damage itself by 6. Whenever an enemy unit takes damage, it heals itself. Usually what you do with this is you put it in your graveyard for Blaze of Glory, because then you're doing 12 or 13 damage, and then you bring it back into your hand with Tear. And for that, it's pretty good. It's one of the best things you can send. You can also just use this with the, what's it called? A Megascope if you want to, because it's 10 base power. Overall, pretty decent unit. It gets pretty, you can see some play in Blaze of Glory decks. Outside of that, you don't see it too much, but as a Blaze of Glory target, it is really good. The fact his veteran's nice. The fact you return it with Tear. Occasionally, even like Raid Warrior decks will play this. You can make it off of like this. That doesn't really account for how good it is, but just a note. It's often the one you want to pick when you see all the choices. Next up here, we have to make an adjustment to the tier list. We'll just leave this guy to the end. Forgot to remove that 3 power one. I added the other ones. Same for this. Stick them to the end. Next up, we have our, where are you? Warcrier. 4 for 4, Bloodthirst 1 at the end of your turn, boost self by 1. Now, Bloodthirst 1's pretty easy, and 1 point per turn engine's not too bad. It just is an okay card. I'm going to go with okay. It's okay. If you want to run an engine in Warriors, you could run this. Just like I said, engines don't really fit the deck's like playstyle too well. I don't know if I would go as far as to say it's weak. I think it's okay, but like on the lower end of okay. Next up, we have the Craite Warrior. It's a 4/4, gives out 3 bleeding, 7/4 total value after time, and from the graveyard does 3 damage. This card is pretty decent, actually. I think I'll put this guy down here, actually. I think I'll put this in a little bit weak. Yeah, I like that a little better, because we're comparing to the other tiers here. This one's not, like, terrible, but I think weaks fits it pretty well. So this guy's not too bad, actually. You see him, you can discard him from things like your discard packages and bring him back because it's 4 provisions with like War of Clans. It's not too bad. It's not the most common thing you see done with that. Usually it's tier 2 Invader, but this is a decent option you could do. Next up here, what is it? It is Anglerfish. We're out of the Craites. So Anglerfish, 2 for 5. This is going, I will just note that as this is near the end of the balance council, this is going to 2 to 4 next council, like 99%. And at the end of your turn, if there's rain or storm on both enemy rows, summon out your deck to your range row. At the end of your turn, if neither enemy has rain or storm, move to the bottom of your deck. So 2 for 5, that thins itself out. I'm going to rate this on how it is right now at 2 for 5. Just note that it'll be, once it goes to 4 provisions, next patch, it'll go straight to the top tier. Just note that I'm rating it as it is right now. Right now, 2 for 5 is a little bit weak. You don't see people really playing the decks that run this, which is Ren-free beasts. Not really rain. Rain's kind of just not good. But I'm going to say this card is good. For right now, I don't have too much familiarity with it at this 5 provision range because no one's playing it. Well, people were playing it when it was 3 power. People were playing when it was 3 power, just haven't seen the deck. I'm just going to leave it here. It's a very strong card to double thin your deck with. And the fact that it goes back on your the bottom of your deck, means it still thins your deck, even if you do lose the rain or storm. It is a little weak at the moment. Like, I wouldn't say it's confidently in the top tier at 2 power, but it's going to go to 4 provisions. And at 3, it was up there too. So we'll say that. Armor Up. So this does 2 damage to a unit and then spawns 3 students. It damages the students by 1 and gives them an armor. So overall, it plays for 5 points. It is a raid. Raid decks do not play this because you really don't. You don't. I actually don't even know. Does the Armor Up? Does Highland Warlord make it kill the students? I don't actually know. I've never tried that because it doesn't go in that deck. It goes in Witchers. How are Witchers? Witchers are a pretty decent deck. They actually want a lot of the students out there, and the fact that their damage has some synergy with the other ones. Overall, I'm going to say this card's fine, kind of like fine. That's kind of fine. But if you're playing Skellige Witchers, you definitely, like most of the time, want it because it gives you those more students. The decks that generate more tokens for Witchers tend to be the better Witcher decks. So this is a pretty key card to them, actually, give them more guys out there. Next up, we have Armored Drakkar. 4 for 4 with 2 armor. At the end of your turn, if it has no armor, gain 2 armor. And then once it's exposed, boost by 1. Bloodthirst boost by 2 instead. People always forget this, that if you have Bloodthirst, that actually has 2 points. But overall, it's a self-damage sink for your self-damage. And it does that job quite well. I'm going to put this one in good. Yeah, it's just good. You can put your self-damage in it, put your priest next to it. It just has some good synergies. It's overall pretty solid. You don't have to play it in like Self-Wound, and outside of Self-Wound, people don't. Not even all Self-Wound plays it, although I think most do. The Golden Necker ones don't, for the most part, but in like pure Self-Wound, it's in there and it's pretty good. Next up, we have Bear Witcher. Adept. 7 for 4. So damage itself by 4, and then turn heals 1. No one actually plays this out of their hand. You always just, well, you might have to, but most of the time you get this off of Portal. Now, as a card off of Portal, it's pretty good. That's how it's used. So I'm going to go right in here and say it's probably in... let's see, how come? Portal's not bad. Like, Portal's pretty decent. Usually you have other things you can go for. Portal has some advantages. People do play it. You don't really want to play this out of your hand because the 4 damage heals back up to 4, which means it gets removed. That's not great, but the extra armor and stuff, it's actually pretty good if you're playing things like the Corsairs. So I think I'll put it in. I think I'll put it in good because does have that Witcher synergy, does have the portal synergy. I think I'll say it's pretty good, but you want to be using it specifically with portal. Next up, we'll just go into more of the Bear Witchers. We have Mentor next. 4 for 5 with an armor. Deploy boost self by 1 for each damaged allied unit, and Adrenaline 3 boost for each damaged unit instead. You can see where it combos pretty well with the armor card from earlier, the Armor Up. Overall, this is just like a pretty solid finisher in a longer round. Got a big resurgence in play. I'm going to say this is okay, I think. It's not as key as like Armor Up and this Art of Witchers. Usually you see this as like a one of, or you make it off of their scenario. Because it's like kind of specific. You want to be playing it with the Adrenaline. And the thing that got this thing to see a lot of play was the Otcal deck with the like 3 or 4 Freya's Blessings. You just bring this back as well. And you could have like a one of, and if you need to bring it back, you could. I think it's up here. It's pretty decent. If you're playing Witchers, you probably, I think, like play like one of this. So that's probably where I'd put it, I think. Definitely decent in several different decks, though. And it can have some really high ceilings. Next up, we have, Quartermaster. 4 for 4 with an armor. Zeal Order, damage a unit by 1, then spawn a student. Student's just here. So you're overall getting 8 value with 2 self-damage. If you absorb the self-damage, you're just getting 8 value. It is spawning the students, which is great for Witchers. It's also just pretty great for self-wound in general as a card. I think I'm going to stick it up here next to Armor Up. Because this has uses outside of Witchers, which is definitely quite... So does Bear Witcher. Like, these both have uses outside the pure Witcher deck. And this is pretty key to the Witcher deck. So I like this how it is. I think this is definitely a pretty good card. Next up, we have regular Bear Witcher, 9 for 5. Deploy damage self by 3, and Adrenaline 4 damage an enemy unit by 3 instead. It'll self and an enemy. So it plays for 9 for 5 with 3 damage when you're Adrenaline. That is pretty solid. This is a pretty solid card. I'm going to stick this up here too in this tier. It has some extra uses because you don't have to play just a Witcher deck because you can play this with Geralt Quen. It'll play it, it'll give it a shield, and then all of a sudden you're playing like a 14-point play or something that's pretty nice. So it has uses outside that. You just play like 2 of these in a Geralt Quen in some decks. So I think it's pretty solid. Next up, we have the Boat Builders. So Boat Builders, 5 for 5. Deploy, give 2 armor. If you control a ship, gain zeal. That's got order, keep putting out armor. This card is very specific to only being considered in the Otkel deck for the most part, because you might want an extra ship or 2, because you need to have enough ships to trigger your Dimun Corsairs, I think they're called. And those guys, they need you to have out enough ships. Like, you have to have a ship out, you play it next to it, get another one. If you only have like 2 ships, you could, like, the 2 long ships, on Craite long ships, the first choice. If you only have those and they're both removed, you might not be able to trigger them because that deck doesn't want to play the D-Moon ranged long ship. So this is a consideration for that specific deck. That makes it pretty niche to me. That's the only time you really see it. So there's a one of consideration there. Next up, we have the Brokvar Hunter, I think he is. Archer, it's Archer. 4 for 4, damage, deploy damage enemy unit by the number of units that are damaged. If you're damaging a bunch of guys, it does a bunch of damage. This is too specific to really include in your deck, but it is excellent to see off of the Feral Bond. I'm going to give it... Like, no one plays this. Is it actually weak, though, or is it just too specific? I just mentioned this because I don't want to consider every card because of this, saying how good they are. The fact that it can be made off of this, it is what it is. I think this card is weak. I think this had a base power, it would have a lot more consideration. Because as a removal card, your opponent needs like 4 damaged cards for us to kill something, which is good value, but like you had 3 damaged cards, maybe this would have enough base value to see play, but it just doesn't see enough play right now. Like it's only played off of Feral Bond. Brokvar Hunter, 4 for 4. Zeal Order range, deal damage unit by 1. Cooldown to when you play a Beast, reduce the cooldown by 1. So this is trying to make you have a synergy between Beast and Warriors, which is kind of cool. And then obviously the Zeal Order does do a damage. It plays for 5 essentially. Cooldown 2 means it's, unless you're playing those beasts, it's pretty slow cooldown. I'm going to say this card's also a little bit weak. Just keep in mind though, anything that's a warrior and 4 provisions isn't terrible because of like War of Clans, which I guess we should talk about soon. But I don't think it's amazing. Like there's definitely better options than this. Leading into Brokvar Warrior, he is a 2 power 4 provisions, damage unit by 3 on deploy, and if the target is damaged afterward, you do it again for 2, then for 1. So total 8 for 4 value is amazing. You can also just use the 3 damage to kill something. This is a really great card, actually. Really great card. If you just have a 4 provision slot left in this faction, this is something you'd consider running, and a ton of decks just run this because it has good flexibility in either getting 8 for 4 value or being used to remove stuff. Next up, we have the Crow ladies. Let's begin with Crow Clan Druid. 4 for 4. Let's see. So Zeal Order, banish an allied crow, then play a 4 provision alchemy from your graveyard and give it doomed. So you banish the crow token and get a 4 provision alchemy. So you're trading 2 power token for one of your alchemies. This is usually pretty good because usually the alchemies are gonna give you about 6 points. It's usually playing about 8 for about 8 if you don't have any synergies out, which is good. The issue with it is just having the crow tokens isn't always the most consistent, and you're already playing druids. Druids are pretty vulnerable to punish, so you're kind of relying on having out the preachers. Overall, this is going to rely heavily on where I think druids fall as a deck. And at the moment, I don't think druids are amazing. I'm going to stick in here because I don't think druids are like a good enough deck for me to consider having them, like their cards be up here. Like I said, niche cards are good in a specific deck. This is only good in exactly druids, which is fine, but druids isn't a very good deck at the moment, especially after the Ale the Ancestors nerf. Next up, we have the Preacher. It's the same deal. Preacher is a very, very strong engine card. It's very strong because once you get multiple out, that bonded 2 per alchemy, you can get a bunch of alchemies. Now these things get really big. That being said, druids overall aren't the strongest deck. I just said that. I think they might be good enough for me to consider them deck defining though. They're not unplayable. They're not on the same tier as these decks for sure though. Put them here. I'm thinking about putting them down here, even though they're like a. I mean, I've played druids. These other Skellige decks are much better. I wouldn't consider druids like a terrible deck. Like druids are better than this armor scam deck. We'll leave them there for now. We'll come back. Next up, we have the Crow Messenger. Crow Messenger is just it's part of the Crow spam deck. A deck's actually not too bad. As you make a bunch of these, and then what this does is deploy summon all copies from your graveyard. You alchemy summon from your deck. So you play this, summon the one out of your deck. Megascopes, Axel, make more and more. Then around 2 and 3, you survive the crows. That deck was pretty popular for a while and is pretty good. There's a reason of the thinning cards. Like this is technically a thinning card. The reason of all the thinning cards that this one stayed at 5 provisions after the other ones got buffed is because that's pretty solid. So I think we'll give this one. I think I'll say that's deck defining. I mean, it's a 1-card bronze deck, right? You just play as many Crow Messengers as possible. Next up, we have Rhizome. Spawn 2 crows on an allied row of controlled druid, spawn 3 instead. This card is weak. Yeah, this card's just pretty weak. No one wants to include this in their deck. I don't think there's much better alchemies, right? If you're playing alchemies for crows, for druids, this is not a good one. Sure, it has 6 total value, but you're spreading out a bunch of tokens, and you're already getting tokens from your other cards, so you might like roast fill up your row. There's better ones like Mahakam Ale has the unlock potential. There's ones that just give you 6 value without druids, like the Mahakam or the Golden Froth, or Maradrome doesn't require you to have like the Rose Space or a Druid already. So overall, this one just kind of falls off a little bit, especially considering the neutral alchemies. It's just like a pretty weak card. It can't actually be buffed. This can't actually be buffed. I'll give it okay because it is an alchemy. You can play it. Let's set the alchemies here. Yeah, I'm going to put this here. I don't think Druids are that bad. I'm going to go with this. I'm going to do this. This is deck defining. So it's good because it's played in Druids. Just note that the Druid deck is definitely below these. I just don't think it quite falls into this niche tier down here. Yeah, I think we'll say that. And because of that, this is okay because you put in it. I like that setup. Next up, we have Deranged Corsair. So 3 for 5, Human Cursed Pirate. Deploy and fuse an enemy with the Death Wish that spawns Cataclysm, then spawn Cataclysm. If this effect goes off, it is 12 for 5, which is incredible value. This is one of the best cards in Pirates because it puts out the Cataclysm, which will ping down through units and then get you more damaged units and get armor on all your guys. And it has really high value. That being said, you don't see it really outside of Pirates, but it's really good in Pirates. It is really, really good in Pirates. Let's see. I think it's not as good as Longship or these guys, though. I think it's like a good card to me. It's definitely good. I like this tier. I like that spot. Because while it is pretty strong in that specific deck, it does have counterplay, right? The Cataclysm, your opponent just won't play in that row, or it'll hit armor or the heal or something. But it is very good. I just don't think I want to put in deck defining for that deck. Next up, the Dimun Corsair. 4 for 4. Zeal Order, remove 2 armor from an allied unit and boosts up by the same amount. And whenever you play a ship, decrease the cooldown by 1. So it's essentially 1, if you even it out over the 2 turns. It's going to play for 6, and then next time uses ability 8. This combos really well with the guy we mentioned earlier, Drakkar, because you can remove the armor, trigger its ability, remove the armor from your Draco Turtle. Overall, I think this is a fine card. I think I'll stick it down here in okay. Usually there's better options for this to trigger stuff like this, but it does have a spot, and if you're playing a more armor-heavy version of Self Wound, this is a decent consideration. You can also consider it in Pirates as a way to remove the armor you've built up. Usually there's better ways to do that. Something like even Yalmar Seawolf, you can turn it into armor much more quickly. So I think this is a little bit suboptimal, but it's not terrible. You can consider running it. Back to Dimun. We're on the Longship. So 5 for 4, Zeal Order, damage self and enemy by 1. It's a pirate card. It gains armor, then it's not damaging itself, and you ping more enemy guys to get the armor set up. It's good. It's a decent, good pirate card. They always play 2. Let's put it in there. Pretty straightforward card. Outside of pirates, you're not getting armor on it. You don't really use it. Let's just grab the pirate while we're speaking about him. 8 for 5. Deploy with the top card of your deck to your graveyard if you control a ship or cancel it. So if you have a ship out, it's an 8 for 5. If you don't, it's an 8 for 5 that gets rid of a card. The getting rid of the card is usually you don't want to do it unless you're playing a Compass deck, in which case you have a Compass deck. This actually has some good flexibility because say you didn't mill your deck enough, or say your abortages weren't online, you didn't thin your deck out enough, you can just play this first and cycle a card, then play your Compass. But overall, it's just a point slam card, mainly for Otkel Pirates, where you play a one of. I don't think they'll say it's an okay card. Along the same lines as this. People when this is 9 for 5, Forgotten Earth, I'd say it was probably good. But I would say it's the top of the OK tier. You consider it. Play one of it maybe 2 if you want to run them in your Pirates for more point slam as opposed to damage. It's not too bad. Next up, we're going to go on the Dimun Pirate Captain. 3 for 4 with 3 charges, each do a damage. Does have Zeal with Bloodthirst too. Dimun Captain, I think this is a bit weak. It's total 6 for 4 value, and you need the Bloodthirst to have Zeal. Sure, you can spread the damage out, but is it really that much better than the 3 random damage on this? Versus more value because it's got base power, and you can just play it. You don't need to have this Bloodthirst set up. I think this is a bit weak, just compared to the other cards here. Next up, we have Dimun Smuggler. 4 for 6. If you play Exo Ship, get a second copy. It's got deal order, deal damage. So it usually plays 10 for 6 because you use the 2 damage right away, or you save it up. But 10 for 6 is pretty good. Like, people think 10 for 6 is good. Or see Nausicaa Sergeant. Yeah, 10 for 6 is pretty good. 2 of it is damage, which is nice, but you do have to play next to a ship. I would say this is the key card, one of the key cards in the Otkel deck. Is it deck defining though? Do I want to stick it here? It's one of these tiers. It's a very strong card. I would move it up here and say it's like deck defining for the Otkel pirate deck. I think that makes sense. I think it's really good. It also gets to like play this in regular pirates too. It's pretty strong. I could see either of these tiers though. Next up we have Dimun Warship. 2 for 4 when you play a pirate, damage itself and a random enemy, and Death Wish summons the highest pirate from your graveyard to this row. This card has potential, right? The idea here is like this does 2 extra damage, it brings back your big pirate. The downside of this is it's just hard to use because pirates give themselves a lot of armor, which makes this card really hard to kill. At 2 armor, like the idea here is this card keeps getting its power reduced, the idea of being easier to trigger the Death Wish. So maybe you can play it in a deck that's not pirates because adding armor to this is really annoying. But this card just hasn't found a spot. I'm gonna stick it in meme tier. Like this card has potential. I've tried to make stuff with this. It's got like self-wound pirates or something. I haven't figured it out yet though. So for now I'm leaving this in meme because no one ever uses it. Alright, next up we have Drummond, I think. No, we got the Berserker. What's this guy's name? Maybe it's just Berserker. Disgraced Brawler. Alright, that's what it's called. Not even Berserker. So 7 for 4. Good stat line there, right? And it's got Deploy, Bloodthirst, 1 Lock Self, Berserk 3, Destroy Self. So this has... this card's not as bad as its play rate makes you think. But it's not good. I'm going to put this one in weak, I think. The Bloodthirst 3 Destroy Self's a little annoying. If this had 8 power, maybe it'd actually be... If this had 8 power, it'd be a really interesting card. Bloodthirst 1 isn't too hard to set up either. This Destroy Self's kind of a big downside. So I'll take 4 damage for it. I think I'll put it in okay. I don't think this card is actually terrible, but I think it's probably a little bit weak. Next up we have Drummond Queensguard. 5 for 5 with Order Berserk 3 spawn a base copy. This card's actually not too bad. So 5 for 5. Berserk 3 means it does 2 damage. There's a lot of 2 damage self-wound effects. It's like the normal amount you do is 2 damage. A lot of 2 damage self-wounds. And then you can make another copy. Like Ceres can heal it, damage the previous one. The Ceres comes out of your deck, not the one that spawns this. Overall, this card only sees play in Ceres, Golden Necker, I believe, or in like some specific experiments with just self-wound as an option. But I don't think it's a weak card. I think it's an option. I think I'm going to go with okay. I think it's fine. It's fine as if you want to play this in a like Golden Necker self-wound deck. I think it makes sense because you want to play Ceres in that, the one that comes out of your deck. I think that's fine. I wouldn't go as far as say it's good because you can play Golden Necker self-wound without that pretty easily, and that's not the most common deck either. But yeah, I'm gonna say this is okay. Next up, we have Shield Maiden. Not how you spell shields. Drummond Shield Maiden, so 5 for 5. When it takes damage, summon all copies from your deck to this row. That's what it does. You make this off of Ceres on Craite. You hit it. The other 2 come out of the deck. I've actually been debating just trying that in plain Self-Wound as a tempo play, or just using this in Self-Wound 2 of these as a thinning. I've thought about it. Overall, this card is fine. However, it is integral to the Saris Lippy deck. Is that deck good enough to be up here? I mean, I said Druids can be up here. We can stick it up here. We're being generous to decks today. We'll say it's deck defining for that because you need this card. You megascope it, get extra copies. I guess the key card in there for the bronzes at least. If Crow Clan Peacher can be up here, okay, this can be up here. Yeah, we'll go with that. We'll be more generous to the decks here. I think Skellige just in general has a lot of pretty solid decks, and their more niche decks aren't like terrible. Back into Drummond. I was right here, I didn't see it. Got the Berserker here, 5 for 4, damaging himself an enemy by 1 at the end of the turn. I think that turns to a bear. It's a total of 8 for 4 value. It has synergy with Saw Blood, has synergy with Self Wound, it does damage. Just a good card. Just a good card. Not much else to say about it. I wouldn't say it's top tier, even though like you guys get value from turning into a bear sometimes with Saw Blood. For the most part, you just like play this for value. And it's pretty good. Next up, we have Drummond Villager, 4 for 4. Gives the unit 3 at 4 bleeding, and it gives the enemy unit 4 bleeding. Now, the problem with this, obviously, is that you're doing the same amount of bleeding to you and the opponent. You're supposed to use this in a way that trigger your effects that are self-wounding or like on a transforming bear abomination guy or something, but really, or on like a play on a Veil card. Like if you get Veil, if your Veil blocks it and you get 4 bleeding to the opponent, that's what people used to do. I think that still works. But I mean, no one's playing this card. It's not very good. The 4 bleeding is too slow, and the other 4 provision options are just better. There's a lot more value in 4 provision bronze warriors than this, as a lot of them have been buffed. Then we have Drummond Warmonger. I've seen this card exactly once, and it was last week, so that's pretty funny. But it's a human pirate, 3 for 5. Deploy, deal 3 adjacent enemies of damage. So 6 for 5. Oh, that's bad. And then it has Bloodthirst 5. This card is the highest Bloodthirst trigger in the game. Deal damage to all enemies on a row by 1. Now, this is so bad that I'm going to have to go into a little detail on it. So, 6 for 5 is really bad. The damage is spread out, which is bad, because you can do 3 random damage. Sure, this is not as... You can target the damage, but cards like this one here, the Captain does 3 damage with the Bloodthirst. You can target those 3 damages, you only cost 4. You do 3 damage with like this guy. Even like the Brokvar Warrior. The difference between the Deploy and the Bloodthirst is really where it shows how bad this is. For 5 Bloodthirst, you're already damaging 3 units on a row by 1. The most you can possibly do is hit 9 units. You're already hitting 3 of them with the base ability, so for the Bloodthirst 5, getting 6 extra damage. Bloodthirst 5 is too hard to trigger. This is like never happens. It just never happens. And if it does happen, you're getting what, 12 for 5? You can get that with a deranged Corsair with way less investment. This card's terrible. It's going in the meme tier. Like this card is just, I don't see much like. No, I will give it bad. Like it's not hopeless. It was 4 provisions. It might actually be like decent. But yeah, it's just bad. It needs to be buffed. Next up, we have Freya's Blessing. Play a bronze, non-neutral from your graveyard. Give it Doomed. Pretty simple. It's an alchemy. Bringing back key cards for your deck is always going to be good. It brings back stuff for a bunch of like this card just has so many applications. It's going straight up here. It just has so many applications. Otkel Pirates. You bring back a bunch of stuff with blessings and Otkel. Druids. It's an alchemy and you bring back your engine druids. Highland Warlord raids. People play this to bring back Highland Warlord. It just has so many uses. It's pretty good. Really good, actually. So much like people complain this card needs to be nerfed. All right, next up we have one more. Oh, it's not Dimun. What's this thing? Oh, it's Funeral Boat. Funeral Boat. Machine ship. 4 for 4, when a card enters either graveyard during your turn, damage enemy by 1. So it's a damage engine whenever you're doing, like usually if you play, this usually means you're playing specials. Or you're like discarding. If you play a special, it does the damage if the card enters your graveyard. If you kill an opponent's unit, enters the graveyard, it ends up doing a good amount of ping damage. The biggest combo you can do this, you like play this on Lippy your deck and do like 12 damage to the opponent. It's pretty funny. But overall, I think it's pretty okay. Not the most popular card, but it certainly has some uses. Maybe I would say this is niche. Like, what's this uses? People use this in Lippy. People use it in like bombs and Sahil decks because you're playing like 3 specials a turn. Yeah, I like niche for this card. I try to say this once per video. Niche does not. The niche cards aren't necessarily worse than the OK cards. They're just more specific. Pretty simple one. Next, Gutting Slash. 4 damage, 6 if you Bloodthirst 2. It's almost always played in combination with Highland Warlords, or you can just have Bloodthirst out there. It's just good. It's just good. Damage is good, control is good. 4's damage is like a reasonable baseline, and the fact can get up to 6 is nice. Next up, we have Havfru Singer. I thought the F was first. Apparently not. Havfru. Try to remember that. 5 for 5. Deploy heal by 2. First time you heal, you can go on a Siren. So this is 9 for 5 if you're healing something. Each turn you're getting 2 points if you're healing. Very strong with healing-based decks. Those decks are kind of limited to like Golden Necker type self-woundy decks at the moment. You don't have to play it in there. What do I think? I think this card's pretty niche. I like niche for this. It can get a lot of engine value, and some games this card will just carry. Give you a whole bunch of tokens, whole bunch of value. But I think it's pretty specific to a deck you want to run it in. Healing and self wound isn't the most common because you're playing like standard self wound, you're not going to fit this in. It kind of only really fits in the ones that want to play like Ceres and do more healing or something. I think it's pretty niche. No, I'm put her in niche too. That makes sense. These guys go together. Yeah, these make sense. I like this in niche. You really have to make your decks to accommodate these cards, but if you do, they can be pretty strong. Guys, I'll request for you. Comment if you like or dislike when I move these cards around after putting them in a tier and then come back and moving them, because I know I do that pretty often. Next up, we have the little Havfru. 6 for 4, bonded. If you have another one out, it gets 2 base power. Second one would be 8 base power. They get damage stuff by 4 and spawn rain. This has some interesting applications, right? If this card gets damaged, like say the opponent hits it with a Gutting Slash, goes to 2 power, you can do the order. You technically only lose 2 points, get out the rain. That's like a little bit of value. It goes really well with rain. It goes in the beasts. The beasts are pretty uncommon because of the anglerfish getting nerfed at the moment. This is a good card in those. Speaking of that, I don't know where it is. I thought these were alphabetical. Oh, I skipped ahead. I typed in Havfru, and then it starts with little, so we skipped ahead. I put a size card is pretty solid. Like, those Renfree Beast decks are pretty good, and this card's like a pretty good card in them. Especially because if you get the bonded off, you can revive it for more points. And people play in rain. Rain's like not very good, but just we'll keep that in consideration to keep it up here. Next up, we have the Druid guy. What's he called? Oh, what's right? He's a Heime guy. Okay, he's just Hermit. Why is he showing up with whatever? Anyway, Hermit. I thought it was gonna be like Heime Hermit or something. So 7 for 4, like, again, good space line, but he damages himself by 4, kind of like the Bear Witcher. Unlike the Bear Witcher, he heals himself by 2 by damaging the unit adjacent to it. So it's like a little bit of self wound, a little bit of healing. In theory, it works well with the little Havfru. In practice, this is the card you don't fit in those decks. I think it's a little weak. The fact that it does the self-wound healing is kind of fine, but if you look at it on paper, in order to get back to the 7 points, you have to do 2 damage, which means you're overall only getting 5 value out of it, unless there's some kind of self-wound synergy. That's not great, and it takes time to, right? Like I said, the Witcher card's pretty good, because you can get that right away. This guy can just get answered, or like they can kill the guy next to it. That you can target the cards you want to hit. This one has to be the one next to it. Overall, I think it's a little bit weaker. Speaking of Heimei, though, we are an herbalist. She's a 1 for 4, deploy ranged heal unit by 3, and boosted by 3. So total 7 value. If you can hit something for the 3 healing. Healing 3 usually isn't, it's not very common, and I think this card is pretty bad. Yeah, it's very specific. If you're not healing 3, this card's bad, because there's not the value. Like, the value in this is 7 for 4 if you heal. It's too specific to get the value. And something healing at 3 and boosting at 3. Yeah, it's just not good enough value, really. Next up, we have Heimei Protector. 4 for 4. When adjacent unit takes damage, boost self by 1. This card has exactly 1 use, which is in the Armor Abuse deck with Armorsmith going right next to it. It's not good enough in normal decks because you're not taking that much damage. Like, it used to be, sure, you could put next to the light longship. You'd penguin the longship. You'd get value back from this. Like, you put it next to like self-wound stuff, but you don't do that anymore. The value in other cards is just much higher. But it still has this spot exactly in the Armorsmith niche deck, that meme deck. I'd say it's a meme deck. Next up, we have Skald. Skald is interesting. This used to be a very common card and very strong card. Now, people, I think, tend to just not run it and rely on hitting their discards off of Berna and Coral. Maybe like a 1 of in this. But it is cycling your deck. So, like, it discards a card, it draws and discards a card. There is discard synergy in Skellige. I don't think it's weak. The common decks don't play this, though. Well, some of them do. Some of them do, like the Compass Lippy decks and stuff. I'm going to say this card's pretty good. As a discarding package is overall good. It's good value. This thins your deck, cycles a card. I don't think it's an excellent anymore, because people, I think, don't necessarily play a lot of these. But I think it's still a pretty good card overall. I like that. And that leaves us with Heimei Spear Maiden. 6 for 4, damage an enemy by 2, and self by 2. So it's a total value of 6 for 4. That's doing 2 damage. It's self-wounding itself. It's just a little weak. Like, this card's not very good. The value isn't there, and when the value's not there, their control has to be able to kill something or have good synergies. 2 damage isn't good enough to kill something, and the synergy on this damaging itself is like, there's a much better self-wound synergies than this. So I don't think this card isn't quite good enough. Next up, we have Mardrome Alchemy, which makes it pretty good for Druids, and then damage unit by 3 and boost it by 9. On the face of it, it's 6 value. In reality, you hit your Drakkar with this, you hit your Draco Turtle, you hit your Sigvald, and it plays for like 12 points or 9 points or a whole bunch of points. This card's actually pretty good. This fits really well with Druids. Fits well with Draco Turtles, fits well with Sigvalds. It's a good card. Has a lot of applications. And we have Melusine Cultist, 4 for 5 with an armor, spawns rain. At the end of your turn, if the rain's across from it, you get a point on your guy. Storm, you get 2 points, 1 on each side. If this order goes off, it plays for 8 for 5 with an engine effect of boosting something next to it. It's actually a very strong engine card. If you get this thing off, most engine cards don't have this much front-loaded value. By front-loaded, I mean like if you use the order on this, it's already played for good value, and then you just wait on the rain. So overall, this card's pretty good. It's good in rain. It's good in the Renfree rain stuff. We'll stick it next to them. This one, on the same stuff, as does Messenger. 4 for 6. Whenever rain or storm damages an enemy, boost self by the damage dealt. It's a multiple point per turn engine. In rain decks, this is the card, right? You can see these cards go up to like 100 points or more. With Ryogan specifically, the combo decks. Even without that, like you put rain on both enemy rows, this thing's 20 pretty easily. Super strong engine card. This will be the deck defining one, I think, for the Renfree Beast deck, along with this. Also just good in rain. The rain combo decks aren't that great, but the fact that you can use this across multiple stuff just lets it elevates it even more. Next up, Primal Savagery, I think it's called. It's a raid. We already talked about the raid stuff. Damage enemy by 2, Deathblow spawn a bear. So it's 8 for 4 value with 2 damage. That's already good as long as you get the Deathblow off. And with Highland Warlord, it's really easy to get the Deathblow off. This is a really good card for raid warriors. I tried to put it in good and it put itself into excellent. I think I'm happier with it in good, though. I'm happier with it in good. Next up, we have the bear himself, Raging Bear. 8 for 5, deploy, damage an ally by 2. A little weak, but it does see some play in decks with Compass and the Compass decks with Flaminica that run Shoop, it is a deck, Compass, Shoop, Flaminica. Because in that deck, you have to play one of, so this card fits into there. You can play one of this. Sometimes you see it in what's her name? Renfree Beast as well, just as another beast to boost up Corrupted Flaminica. So I think this card's actually going to fall into the okay tier. If you open with it, it's an 8 for 5 opener, which is, that's not the best thing, but I mean, people play other stuff that's 8 for 5. And just because it fits its way into those decks, I can't like say it's terrible. Those are good decks, and it does get played in them. I wouldn't consider it in Self-Wound, though. Like, I think this is pretty much just a Renfree Beast card, because you're limited on the number of cards and Beast you have, and a Shoop Beast card. Does that make it niche? Those decks are good. I'll leave it here. Then we have the Savage Bear. So 4 for 4. Gain a charge for each Savage Bear in your graveyard. It's the exact same deal. It's got 6 for 4 value on it, and then 8 for 4 if there's another beast in your graveyard already. It's the same deal. It goes in the same deck. I'd say it's a little better than the Raging Bear. It doesn't go in the Lippy one with Shoop because you can only play one of it, so you don't get the value on its ability. But in the Renfree one, it's a little better because it just has the value on cheaper provisions. Does that make it up here? Is it good? I think it's fine. I think you can consider it like in any Lippy deck too, if it's not Shoop based. I think it's fine. We'll put it there. Sea Serpent. So it's okay, I mean. There's usually better choices unless you're are limited on unit type, which you are in the Renfree. But I don't really want to say this is a good card overall. This one especially. This one maybe you could argue is up here, but I want to leave it here for now. Sea Serpent 1 for 5, and it has boost self by 0, damage enemy by 3, and the boost is increased for each turn Storm or Rain was out. Usually you have Storm or Rain out, say 4 or 5 turns. This does 3 damage. You're looking at 6-9 value. It's not that bad. Usually it's a one of potentially in these rain decks. I'm going to put it here. I like okay for this card. It's not a card I personally like to play in rain decks, but I have seen people do it. I think that it just takes too long to get up to a good point slam on this. And often you want to play the 3 damage to kill something, and it's not getting much value. Or like you could just play the Brokvar Warrior for the 3 damage. Seagull. 1 for 4. Damage 3 guys by 1 and spawn a seagull in your graveyard for each. That was damaged or destroyed. Then when you use destroyed, summon itself from your graveyard. So this plays for 7 if you damage 3 guys and the 3 seagulls come back. It is also damaging 3 guys by 1, which is nice for setting up Bloodthirst. It's nice for pirates. It is a pirate. That being said, sometimes if they don't have 3 units, you have to hit your own cards because it doesn't say enemy units, right? So sometimes you have to hit your own cards and lose value. Overall, I don't see this card too much, to be fair. I don't see it very often. It used to be a pretty common pirates card, but I don't see it too much anymore. I'll say it's okay. It's a consideration if you're playing like pirates. It can do damage for you, but usually like the ships and stuff's better. Next up, Stunning Blow. What a stunning card. Comment if that was in any way funny. Stunning Blow is a raid, so it's got that going for it. 5 damage if the target has armor, deals 7 instead. I don't remember when this was 4 provisions. It was like 4 and 7 if it was armor. Insane 4 provision card, by the way. But now it's 5. So this card is kind of fine. You only really see it played in Raid Warriors, and usually it's like a one of. As like a niche thing if there's something with armor that's hard to kill. It is 5 for 5 damage. Here's the thing. 5 for 5 damage cards are generally pretty good, but Skellige just has so much damage. If you you've seen what we've gone through right so far. There's just so much damage that you don't need this. And usually if you want a damage card, I'd probably run a Gutting Slash over this. Because the 6 reach is more specific. Sure, because of the Bloodthirst, but the Bloodthirst isn't too hard to set up. And not everything has armor. It really is just a Raid Warrior card. But it is played in that. I haven't played Raid Warriors since the day Highland Warlord came out, so I don't know the meta deck. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and put it up here, because I don't know if it's a 1 or a 2 of in that deck. If it's a 2 of in that deck, it would fall in the good, I would say. You can play this in other decks. I've played this in like as a 1 of 2 in other decks, but between good and okay for me, but I think we'll leave it here. Because at the end of the day, if you do want a 5 damage card, you can put this in your deck. Oh, we went back too far. Alright, whatever. We'll work with it. Butcher. Soul Blood Butcher here. 5 for 4. Damage an ally by 2, and then give an enemy bleeding 3. Now, the value here is 8 if you ignore the self-damage, which I don't really want to do, because self-damage is effectively hurting you. The value on the self-damage is usually I assign to the cards that are taking the self-damage, like the Drakkar. But I think this card's generally just okay. Is it okay or weak? When I say card's okay, like I wouldn't be excited to play it. I have seen people play it. Putting it down here. I'm not a big fan. He's a 4-version warrior, but this is not something you're going to play with War of Clans. So overall, I think it's not the best. If it gained to power, would it be too strong? That's like the consideration here, right? Like if these cards got buffed, the cards in the weak tier got buffed. If they're too strong, then I'd probably put them in the okay tier. I don't think it'd be too strong. Yeah, I like him there. I think it's weak. Let's grab the healing one. Swallowblood Cultist, and then you turn heal the unit to the left by 1, damage unit to the right by 1. Theoretically, some synergies here. Also, her premium card's pretty cool looking. I think we'll put her alongside the one we just placed, the Butcher. I think she's a little weak. Yeah, I think she's a little weak. Yes, the healing, like this is one of the only cards that can heal every turn to combo with like a Have Fruit Singer, but that's not the best thing to rely on because you really only have the Have Fruit Singer for something like that. So I think at the end of the day, it's a little weak. healing and damaging. Like overall, this is a net neutral unless you're synergizing with something else, right? Like the heal and damage should even out. But what you end up doing is trying to like damage like with armor, heal something that has an effect. I think it's a little weak. Next up, we have Smallblood Fanatic. Smallblood Fanatic, 4 for 4. Berserk 2, transformed Baron Abomination. This is objectively far worse than the Drummond Berserker, because it doesn't do the 2 ping damage for transforming, so it's 2 less points. And you get this off of the Smallblood Totem. There's exactly one situation where this card is good. There's 2. The first situation is you're getting off a Totem, which has nothing to do with this card in itself, because Totem's pretty good. Well, it does have to do with this card, because you're getting 2 of it. It's pretty good from Totem. Are you going to ever include this card in your deck? There's exactly one situation you include this card in your deck. That is in a Lippy deck, where you have 2 extra leader charges from the Your Sign Ritual. You can hit this with a 2 leader charges, because then it doesn't go back in your deck with Lippy. That's it. It's going here. It's a meme card. It's not meme off of Totem, but that's just on Totem. Like, you don't actually include Fanatic in your deck ever, except for a one of in sometimes, if you want to be kind of funny, or a one of in like a Ceres deck to hit with the leader charges. Next up, we have Priest. Priest is actually not too bad, so it's a 3 for 5, and your turn damage the unit to the right by 1 and boost self by 2. Pretty strong engine, combo it with Drakar, get a bunch of points that way. I think I actually want to stick it next to Drakar and say it's pretty good. Like, this is a pretty good Self Wound card. Self Wound doesn't always play these engines, though. I don't know. I like running Priest. I've seen a lot of people not running Priest, though. It does have synergies. It's not that bad. At the end of the day, would I say this is a good card or an okay card? As I strike the twisty thing on my microphone, boom, make a big noise. I'm going to leave it in good. I think it's a good Self Wound card. It might not be in all the decks, but it's still good enough to be in a lot of them. Next up, we have... Oh, those are some golds. Where's my bronze color? I forgot to reset that. We have the Smallblood Ravager. 3 for 4. Even Cultist Warrior. Damage enemy by 2. And Bloodthirst to give it bleeding 2. This isn't too bad. Because at the end of the day, which I've been saying a lot in this video, because it is near the end of the day when I'm recording this, 3 for 4 that does 2 damage is 5 for 4, the 2 bleeding. The Bloodthirst 2 isn't the worst thing ever, because it is doing the 2 damage. I don't want to... I think it's a weak card for me. I think it's weak. There's just so many damage options in Skellige. Like I said, if they're a 4-person warrior, you can consider them, but there's just so many better things. Like, and the better things are much better. So at the end, I don't think this is really going to be worth it. I think it's going to fall in the weak tier. Next up, we have Tears of the Siren. Spawn Rain for 2 turns and spawn a Siren opposite. So objectively, it's 6 points. 2 turns of it is Rain, and then you get a 2-point Siren. This is a meme card. 2 points of Rain. If you want to play Rain deck, you'd rather play Torrential Rain and Tempest, because that's thinning your deck. It's 3 turns of Rain, it's the same value, but synergizes more. Tears of the Siren's just not it. It's just not it. There's enough ways to get Rain that this is never a consideration. Sure, you can say like it's an Alchemy. You could do an Alchemy Rain deck, but that's not a thing. Because Alchemy really wants to have... Alchemy and Rain, you want to dedicate a lot of your deck to those cards, so they don't really mix well. Yeah, this is a meme card. Next up, we have... what are we? We're in Tier Sec. Oh, I think we skipped somebody. What are you? I want to say it's a not Ravager. What is this guy called? This guy with anyway. This guy here is going to do 2 damage. And then when he has exposed, he's going to have his when he's exposed, he does like random damage to the opponent. I thought we'd be able to get through this one with naming all the cards without having to look anything up. Terror Crew Axe Wielder. That's right. Yeah, so it does 2 damage, then exposed does 2 random damage. Sometimes I just forgot the cards' names. Now this card's interestingly designed, right? Where it's plays for 5. It's a human pirate, not a warrior. So it does plays for 5, then exposes random. Random damage isn't worth that much. The fact that it's a self wound, this kind of falls into the same thing as the guy we talked about earlier, the Dimun ship. Self wound and pirates, I haven't found or even seen a way they've been combined. And if you're not combining them, this card is just not going to be worth anything. And it's going to go right down here next to it in a meme tier. This is one card I can confidently say I have never seen played against me. But on the other hand, while we're here, let's hit the Terror Crew up again for the Terror Crew Plunderer. Now this card actually has a little bit of use. So it's 3 for 4 with an armor, damage unit by 2, so 5 for 4 again. But if it's an allied unit, it boosts self by 4. So if you use this for self wound, to trigger your self wound is playing 7 for 4, which is fine. Usually there's better self wound cards, but this one's not terrible. I think I'm gonna put it in weak still. I think I'm still putting it in weak. It's not terrible, but usually you'd rather use something else to trigger your self wounds. Like, I even like the Butcher if we compare these two. They both do 2 damage. Yeah, I think I'll leave it here. I almost want to put it up here, but because it used to be like a one of sometimes in self wound, but that's not really true anymore. No one plays this anymore. So I think we'll leave it in weak. We've gained like a base power or something. You could have more value from it when you did decide to offensively use it, but no one really does that. I think we're on tier sec now, right? Nope, we have the Tidecloak Hideaway, I think it's called. Tidecloak Hideaway, 5 for 5, deploy, boost the unit by 1 for each pirate in your hand. This is going right next to the other ship here in Niche. This card has almost no uses because pirates and ships go in the pirate deck, and that deck wants its ships to do damage. You want to play the light long ship. You want to play the on Craite long ship. You want the damage ships. You don't really want this opener. You want to open up with things that ping the opponent to get armor on your cards. The only time you consider this, why I'm putting it in niche and not in a really bad tier, is because you can play this in the Otkel Pirate deck as your one-of ship if you out in addition to the long ships. Same reason this ship's here. Same reason the boat builders are here. Can be a one-of in that deck, where it's fine. But outside of that, it's not good. And again, this is the Syndicate and Skellige mix crossover card. You can play it in either faction. It gets more play in Skellige than it does in Syndicate, which should tell you something. You forgot to change. All right, we're on tier sec here. Where is our tier sec? I think we'll do Axeman first. I think it's the first one. 4 for 4 with damage a unit by the amount is already damaged. Now, on paper, this looks like it could be pretty good if a unit has taken 4 damage. It does 4 damage to it, which is really nice. But if the unit's taken 4 damage already, it's probably dead if it's an engine. Or if it's not an engine, you're way overkilling it. So this really doesn't have much use outside of niche situations with Feral Bond, which doesn't tell me anything about how good the card actually is. I think it's weak. It might just be bad, honestly. This card has a design issue where in order for it to be doing enough damage to be really good, the target had to take a lot of damage, which means it's only good against like tall cards for the most part. Maybe if it had like an extra, well, if it had another base power or something. No, I don't like this card. I don't like it. I think it's pretty bad. It's way too specific. And anytime you're like, well, if the unit took 2 damage and it's an engine, if I did 2 more, I could kill it. Yeah, there's like at least 10 cards here that do 2 damage. So this is only really good when the thing's taken a ton of damage already, which is just, it's usually either dead or like it's too niche. Let's hit Invader next, actually. So Veil Veteran, tier 2 Invader, is a really good card. It's got nothing else going on. It's Veil Veteran. The Veil means when you bring it back with blessings and such in War of Clans, it doesn't get the doomed. You can keep doing it. And the Veteran means it's a 7 by round 3. And if you're playing with King Brand, it's an 8 for 4, just point slam. It's just a good card. Just a good card. Mainly in Raid Warriors, but it's a good card. Just good. Not much else to say about it. Speaking of things to not say about, Tirsek Beastmaster, or Bearmaster, I guess he's called now. 2 for 4, Human Warrior. Deploy boosts himself by number of unique allied beasts. In order for this to be good, you have to have at least 5 or 6 beasts. And they have to be unique. So you can't have, like, play a Crow Clan Preacher and bring back 5 Crow Clan Preachers. Not Preachers, Crow Clan Messengers. You only get 1 point then. It's just too hard to get this to be good. And the order is just, he damages himself by his boost and then damages that many enemies units by 1. They have to have that many units for this damage. So really this is a pretty niche use of the order. Usually just play it for point slam, but it just takes so many beasts to be good that this is just a meme card. It's just a meme card. It takes so many unique boosts for this to be good value that, sure, I could have 6 other beasts out and this plays for 8. By the time you have 6 other beasts out, there's better synergies you could be doing. It's just not good enough. The low is too low, and the ceiling, like the ceiling's fine if you have a whole bunch of unique beasts, but it's too hard to get there. And when you're not there, the value is so small. Like say you're playing a short round and you play like 2 beasts, and for this it's 4. It's just not good. Now we have the Skirmisher. This card's discarded, something from your graveyard to your melee row. Straight to top tier. We're gonna give this one, where did we put the Scald? We put him in good, I think. Anyway, we'll talk about this. So Skirmisher is really good because it gives tempo to your thinning. Well, thinning / cycling. When you're doing a discard effect, and then you discard this, it gives you more tempo, which means the discard package is a tempo package as well, which is really nice. It's very good. I think it's a little better than the Scald because you can do the discarding without the Scald, and that's what I see most people doing. Where right now I don't see where I put the Scald at all. I thought I put it in the good tier. Put it in okay tier. Yeah. This is definitely the better one because the gold discard package usually see instead of this. I want to move him up. I think I'd say it's good. Yeah, I thought I put him in good honestly earlier. But yeah, I think good. And then this is more important because you can use this with the gold discarders and not need him as much. I like that. Then we have Veteran. Deploy, damage self by 3, so it's a 5 for 5, and Berserk 3 is heal. The Dreams, you put this next to your self wound stuff, like the Priest, keep pinging it, it heals itself back up. But it's just inferior to Drakkar at that. So that's gonna unfortunately put it down here in weak. And also, I hate to be you hate to see it. Whenever you play this, somehow the opponent is Nilfgaard and has Illusionists, and this thing goes to 8 and they get the 1 power thing back from Illusionist, which is just like brutal. But it's just outshined in this role by other cards. War of Clans. is a good card here. So it's 2 damage, 6 provisions, 2 damage. Play a bronze 4 provision warrior from your graveyard, give it doomed. Technically, it's not bronze, so if any of the other warriors that are gold do get put to 4 provisions eventually, you could bring them back, I suppose. And then it has Devotion Archery Death Blow. So this is always played in Raid Warriors with Devotion. You can kind of play it in Alula Warriors, but that deck's not very popular. Because you don't play it in the Golden Necker one. You can play it like a regular one. It's just a really good card in Raid Warriors, so I think it is top tier. So alongside these are really good. Yeah, I like this. It's very, very strong. Which leaves us with the last card here. The Whale Harpooner. 2 for 4. Move enemy to the other row and damage it by number of units on that row. Movement is kind of useful. This card's actually got it. Like, people don't play this very often, but it's not too bad, actually. You can usually get 2 or 3 damage out of this, and then you're getting a movement. And then longer rounds, you can get like 6 damage, which is really good. The downside for it compared to other movement cards is it's got a pretty low floor. They just like play like, say they play a long ship, you want to move it. It's only a 2, so it's not great. But it does have some use as like a 1 of in some decks. Can get some decent value. Debating if I want to put it at the top of this tier. I think I'll put it here. It could use a buff, I think. It's not bad though. Yeah, I'll put it here. I am very partial to Whale Harpooner personally. I really like this card personally, but I don't see it played very much. So I think we'll leave it here. Yeah, I think we'll go with that. And then these cards are ones we have duplicates of. These are the unbuffed versions, so just ignore those down here. I forgot to remove them. I added the new ones. But I think that's the tier list. Let's go take a look over it real quick here. If there's anything I want to change. This is used really widely, which is why it's up here. Yeah, Akel. These are deck defining cards. This deck's probably the weakest of these. The Renfrey Beast deck's pretty good. I'm just kind of looking through all the tiers. I feel like there's a card that doesn't belong with the other ones in the tier right now. This is one I feel like doesn't belong, but it is because here Druids. I'm giving Druids a little bit of a break here because I like them. I could see the argument for this card to be good. Same with this. These two I could see being good. This card going to go up into the good tier. This one probably should because Pirates and Otkel use it. Probably the same for this. It's Witchers and them use it. I think I'll keep these ones here though. I'm not sure about this one. I really haven't seen it be played much. People just like rely on this. I like this better. I feel more comfortable with these in this tier. I wasn't too sure about them earlier, but now that we're going back looking through everything, I think it makes sense. I'm debating about moving Scald up too, thinking about the Lippy Compass decks. But usually they don't even play Scald. They play like Burn Nut Coral. If you're playing Discard Package, you can. But there's enough thinning in Skellige with Borders in particular. People don't really play this, even in Compass. I still want to leave it in good though, because it is pretty good if you're playing Discard Package. These are all fine. Niche. Yeah, these are niche cards for sure. Weak. I could see this one in okay. Like, I'm debating. I really like Whale Harpooner personally, but I think I'm overselling it, so I'm going to compensate by leaving it down here. I think any of these are particularly worse than the other ones and should go down a tier. No, these are bad. This one's like some of these are here because like if this was 4 provisions, it could be good. The thing with priest, the fanatic here, is I've explained pretty well why this is never like these just don't have a spot anywhere. This is really bad because it can't like it just doesn't have it's not nearly as good as the other options. This I explained is really bad. The thing with fanatic, I should explain here, is fanatic cannot be buffed. If you increase the fanatic's power, it gets worse because it's harder to trigger the self wound, flipping it into the abomination. And you can't buff it because then the totem would get really good. Like 2 extra points on its deploy is insane. So this card can't be buffed. Like obviously this can't either because it's special. I'm pretty happy with this. These are just duplicates that I forgot to remove. I'm going to take them out real quick. But that's the Skellige tier list for you guys. Let me know what you think. Hopefully you had fun watching, and we'll see you next time.